Book 3, Last Transit, Chapter 74. Perhaps all was as simple as that Dixon wished to remain, and Mason did not, could not. So Dixon returned as well, and on 15 December 1768, at a meeting of the Royal Society Council, according to the minute book, there they are, together in the room. Both have chosen to wear grey and black. Messrs. Mason and Dixon attending with proposals relative to the aforesaid intended observations were called in, and Mr. Dixon acquainted the council that he was willing to go to the North Cape or Cherry Island. Mr. Mason rather declined going, but added that if he was wanted, he should be ready to go. Was their appearance all pro forma? Did Dixon know? Did they have it all worked out beforehand, or was it sprung upon him, and thus less forgivable than the accustomed Masonical behaviour? The meaner of spirit might translate it into, "Of course I'll go, but not with Dixon," a clear insult, Dixon was often advised. Would he not care to respond? "I've grown so used to it," Dixon assured his comforters, "that often I neglect to take offence." Privately, his sentiments are more of a hopeful turn. He knows enough of Mason to recognise by now most of the shapes his pursuit of the gentlemanly takes on, as well as the true extent of his progress, beyond the socially stumbling philosopher-fool he began as. That is, 'tis possible that Mason, honestly believing Dixon ready for it as deserving of his own command, is willing to risk looking ungracious, if it will advance that end. And so this rather decline, yet if I am wanted formula is but more of his inept kindness. They leave together, out into another Christmastide, each for his own reason seeking the brightest lights. Some horrible Boswell pursues them, asking questions. Known, of course, as the reluctant lensman of the Cape expedition to observe the first transit of Venus in 61, and despite the generally excellent quality of your work, neither of you has been voted to membership of the Royal Society. Mr. Mason, we have heard you're the one here who's unhappy with that, whilst Mr. Dixon takes the more philosophical view. Only the long view, lad. How could the elder Charles have forgiven Mason for leaving his children with his sister, dumping them, really, going off to the Indies with another man, another stargazer, coming home only to turn about and sail off to America with the same man? Dixon sees the pattern, the expectation, the coming transit of Venus. Mason sees it too. If we went off a third time together, he hates me enough already. I study the stars against my father's wishes. But do I remain among 'em? Only at the price of my sons. That is what I face. Some choice. So he declines the North Cape, and another posting together, symmetrically as ever, to that end of the world lying opposite their first end of the world. Someone must break this damned symmetry, Mason mutters. For years, as he found his way further into the walled city of melancholy, he dreamed, though presently no longer sure if it had been asleep or awake, of the North Cape, and the North Cape he would never see. An unexpectedly populous land where the native people were enslaved by a small but grimly effective European team, courted and mostly restricted to an area within easy reach of their boats, upon which indeed many of them preferred to sleep. The only industry there was mining the guano of the seabirds and shipping it to lower latitudes, to be processed into nitre for gunpowder, which was in great demand as it seemed that far below a general European war had broken out. For dynastic, racial and religious reasons, Mason and Dixon, who was also in the dreams, realized they were ignorant of, having been out of touch with any kind of periodical news for 8 or 9 years now. They arrived at the North Cape to find the mines working day and night shifts, and the mood turning unpleasant, as white overseers demanded more and more from workers who were not making enough for it to matter what the warring nations below did to each other, nor on what schedule. The guano deposits, and hence the mining, were upon rocks off the coast, often quite far out to sea, where the light was crepuscular and clear. The guano was carried out to the ships in scows of soaked, black, failing timbers. Loading these vessels directly from the rocks was perilous work. Weather often swept in, carrying away ships and souls. The natives, who were dark-skinned and spoke none but their own tongue, deserted when they could, and many times contrived their own deaths when all else had failed to deliver them. At Maskelyne's behest, or should I say Maskelyne's behest, Mason agrees to observe the transit from South Ulster, where he obtains the ingress of Venus upon the disk of the sun, but not her departure. The mists rising up out of the bog. There she is, full, spherical, the last time I shall see her as a material being. When next appearing, she will have resumed her deity. Maskelyne will edit this out, which is why Mason leaves it in his field report. Shall Ireland be his last journey out, his last defiance of Sapperton, which is to say, Rebecca? There's no place for him in London. The city has never found his heart, and 'tis his heart that keeps a residue of dislike for the place ever guarded. Likewise must he allow himself to let go of Dixon, soon now. He sees nothing but penance ahead, and renunciations proceeding like sheep, straggling back, gathering to shelter. He sits alone in brand new rooms, of which he may be the very first occupant, and the smell of plaster and paint and glue, the paper upon the walls, an assault of colour, indigo, cochineal red, Spanish orange, the often observed magenta and green, the day outside unable to emerge from morning. Rebecca, whom he expects to visit, does not appear. He waits, trying to see his way ahead. Suddenly, 16 again. He tries to think of how, short of suicide, he may put himself in her way. He is furious about everything. He screams at length about transient setbacks, however slight. Misses his family, the servants tell it, no sleep. The house is large, inexpensively Palladian, with beds in every room, not only the parlour and the drawing room, but the kitchen and the music conservatory as well. Shadows are everywhere, unpredictable. Mason tries each room in turn. Other guests are out upon the same pilgrimage. They meet in the halls and mutter civilities. In the music room he wakes during the night and mistakes the clavier for a coffin, with somebody in it withal, who may or may not be another sleeper. Out in the bogs, fairy lights appear. He hears a note from the cased instrument, then another. He much prefers the kitchen or the observatory out back. There he is, hypnagogically instructed all night long in the arts of silent food preparation, the sandwich, having found here a particular admiration for the virtual soundlessness of its assembly. In a letter dated November 9th, close to Mason's departure from Donegal, Maskelyne as A.R. is wallowing in the pleasure of good instruments to work with at last. The defective bob suspension is now but a distasteful pang of memory, causing him at his morning shave to grunt and avoid his eyes in the mirror. The sector telescope he finds charming. I have also used a 10-foot telescope with a micrometer. Your moral reflections on the subject I approve of, as becoming an astronomer, who ought to make this use of these sublime speculations. What was he talking about? In Maskelyne's letter, which we have, he says he's responding to a letter of Mason's dated October 15th, which no one can locate, including me. Indeed, I've not found any of Mason's letters, though there are said to be many about. Make something up then, Munchausen would. Not when there exists somewhere a body of letters Mason really did write. I must honour that, mustn't I, Brother Ives? Ives snorts and chooses not to contend. Why not gamble they'll never be found, wonders Athelma. Just because I can't find them doesn't mean they're not out there. The question may be, rather, must we wait till they are found? To speculate as to the form, moral reflections upon a 10-foot telescope with a micrometer might take. The presence of this device, as well as the instrument's length, suggests an accuracy to perhaps 2 further degrees of magnitude than the instrument it replaced at Greenwich. sublime speculations. Accuracy and sublimity. Is the AR being ironical? Whatever Mason had to say almost certainly included God. Was he off the deep end again? Make this use suggests Mason had advanced some program. Suppose he had written to Maskelyne. "'Tis the reciprocal of as above, so below, being only at the finer scales, that we may find the truth about the greater heavens. The exact value of a solar parallax of less than 10 seconds can give us the size of the solar system. The parallax of Sirius, perhaps less than 2 seconds, can give us the size of creation. May we not, in the domain of 0 to 1 second of arc, find ways to measure even that which we cannot, may not see?" Many of us in the parsonical line of work, admits Wicks Cherrycoke, find congenial the mathematics, particularly the science of the fluxions. Few may hope to have named for them, like the Reverend Dr. Taylor, an infinite series. Yet such steps, large and small, in the advancement of this most useful calculus have provided us a rack full of tools for analysis undreamed of even a few years ago, though some must depend upon epsilonics and infinitesimalisms and other sorts of defective zero. Is it the infinite that tempts us, or the imp? Or is it merely a vocational habit, ancient as Kabbalah, of seeking God there among the notation of these resonating chains? Reminds me of America. Strange. Some mornings I get up and think I am in America. Half mountain, half bog, every other soul in it named O'Reilly, oak boys with night mischief in mind all about. This is frontier country again, standing betwixt Ulster and the Dublin Pale. This is, whilst of neither, poor, at the mercy of landowners. Whilst of neither, poor, at the mercy of landowners, such as Lord Pennycumquick, the global communications nabob, who now approaches Mason upon the lawn, carrying in coat pockets the size of saddlebags 4 bottles of the cheap claret, everywhere to be found here, thanks to enterprising Irishmen in Bordeaux. "In my family since the second Charles," he calls in greeting. "Isn't 100 years considered old for wine?" Mason, having risen kickish this morning. "Oh, but I meant the coat," Pennycumquick, having decided, with legions before him, that Mason, because he speaks in the hurried and forced rhythms of at least a tickler of children, is a professional wag of some sort. "Aye, 'tis called a morning coat, the yellow symbolizing the sun, I imagine. Several theories about these aqua bits here, examining them the way we examine our waistcoats for spilled food, being of course our famous, historically subversive colour green, should have been a hanging offence as long ago as Robin Hood, if you ask me, yet disguised cleverly, you see, by the addition of blue. Perhaps a touch of buff as well. Ha! Ha ha ha! Do not look so concerned, sir, being all Whigs here staunch and true. Yes, well, do come along. You've not seen the folly yet, have ye? What cannot escape Mason's notice, as they come round the butt end of the topiary elephant, is a sudden vista of obelisks, arranged in a double row, too long to count, forming an avenue leading to the folly. In this sunlight they have withdrawn to the innocence of stone, into being only here enough to maintain the effect of solemn approach. Yet it isn't hard for Mason to imagine them in less certain light, at a more problematic time of day, taking on more human shape, almost human shape, somewhat larger than human size, almost able to speak. There it is. What do you think? The Lord has halted, pockets asway to help Mason admire it, this being a task inadvisable for but one person. You can't say it isn't something, is Mason's comment. Of course, if you've read Mr. Halfpenny's Rural Architecture in the Chinese Taste, you'll recognise those bits there at the roof corners are our great Buddha. Half-scale, regrettably. Here, therapeutic pool, peat baths. Good morning, Rufus. I trust your good woman has recovered. Excellent. She ran that department. Chaos since she left. Ah, the electric machines. Yes, a good many of them, all the way down to the end there. Can you make it out? On the rare chance you have an appetite when you emerge, lo, a summer kitchen, complete with gesticulating chef. Yes, yes, soup du jour, Armand. Clever fellow, claims to know you, as a matter of fact. Mr. Mason! Mr. Mason! 'Tis the very Frenchman, is it not? Yet why then is his figure illuminated so much less than everything else about this time of day? Why is he moving so smoothly as a boat upon still water? Looming ever closer, aiming, it now becomes apparent, a kiss at Mason's cheek, his colour at close range, aberrating toward green, as he sweeps in a cold wind upon and past the shivering Mason with an echo, like an odour, trailing after. Mason turns. The lawn is empty. At some moment he has failed to mark. Lord Pennycombe-Quick has left him. He stands by an oven, with moss between its stones, that he wishes upon no account to look into. The rain has raised in everyone an insomniac apprehension in which all talk is of bog bursts, in which all talk of bog bursts is avoided. Yet 'tis but a question of where the black flood shall break through. The longer it rains, the higher too the level of nerves and vapours. No one here, or for miles, will need to be awakened for long. At last, one midnight, Bog burst! Out upon McIntaggart's piece. Good evening to ye, sir, and regretfully must I now be telling ye, you've been, as they say in your Royal Navy, impressed, sir. Oh, I am impressed, Mason agrees. Really, the efficiency with which you are able to turn all these wretches to is nothing short of impressive, indeed. Excuse me, sir, 'Tis me English, no doubt. I meant that you too must come out and work in the company of these very wretches. Of course, man of science, ever happy to advise. Restoring the berm, is that how we'll be at it? Some day when all's calm, I'd love to chat over with ye the finer points of bog-burst management. Yet now would I suggest boots and gloves, sir, and smartly too, if ye'd not be minding. Little McTiernan at the door is giving out short-handled peat cutters styled by the Irish slains. Not sure I know how to cut a sod, mumbles Mason. Quickly's best, before he can pick up a weapon. Let him be, Dermy. Not his fault he's English. Bogs, Mason to himself, as long as they go along, bearing candles and hollowed-out turnips, not certain if he is speaking aloud. Ah, my destiny! I imagined Delaware, not merely the end, but years past the end of this sort of journeyman's humiliation. Even fancied that I'd earned passage at last into a purer region where my thesis should rule, with nothing beyond an occasional ink smudge to recall to me that unhappy American station of the cross. Ah, stars and mud, ever conjugate. A paradox to consider. One for the astronomer royal, perhaps. His current scheme being to assail masculine sanity, by now and then posing him questions that will not bear too much cogitating upon. Most lately, Uber Bernulis Brachistochrons Probleme, 1702, by Baron von Boppdorfer. Mind like a Spanish blade. Read it at the risk of your self-esteem. Having almost done the trick. Slodging the wet tracks, dressed all in the local frieze, Mason, by neap lantern light, looks like a wet, truculent sheep. The rain comes down. They cross the river, passing round Kiddew and Kinnipottle, where more come creeping from sleepless dwellings to join them. Mason might be travelling with a herd of ghosts, felt but invisible, bearing him into country unknown. The sky tonight has nothing to show him. Now and then, very much closer to the earth, he begins to see lights, moving, flickering, soon gone. Who are they? Mason inquires of his faceless companions. Hush! Come half a dozen voices at once. They are going their way, as we go ours, whispers someone behind his right ear. They are not often out in the rain, nor particularly helpful in a slide. Soon they have reached one shore of the liquefied peat flow, through some mirage, blacker than the neighbouring night. McIntaggart's been after that tithe for a year, and now 'tis his for nothing. He kept still, and the premises moved. Look out, here comes more of it. What, a repeat? In Irish perversity all equip, they set to work finding and cutting out peat sods not yet saturated by the rain. Other countrymen appear now and then bearing rocks, piling them laboriously against the burst, through the drizzling of the night. Cottages, dazed, come wobbling down the hill. Dawn finds the tops of the hillsides obscured, each shiftmate a wan spectre in the vaporous bog. Mr. Mason. Your servant, sir. 'Tis the well of St. Brendan, if you please. Thought he was a Galway lad. No, he passed through cavern once on his way to the sea, looking for the crew, and from the spot where he slept came forth the very water that they drank in Eden. So lovely is it to taste. Now in the general relocation has it vanished. Though we've dowsers aplenty, yet all are in perplexity, not to mention humility, in begging the application of your London arts in discovering and restoring it. Of the very thing, Mason replies. Among his equipment at the penny-come-quick manor is the crease from his dream in Cape Town, which he has kept ever by him. Have you water from this spring? He paws and rubs it over the blade, returning to the bog burst, where immediately he senses attraction, a warmth, a queer, high whine along the blade, though 'tis none of these. Here, I believe. He helps them to dig. At no great depth, a spring is encountered whose perimeter is quickly shored against recollapse. One by one, country folk taste the water. Some say it is the very spring of the saint. Others say it isn't. In fact, there is so wide a difference of opinion that presently what will be the first of many blows are exchanged. In an ordinary dream, Rebecca appears. No need to feel pleased with yourself. What you found was not their sacred well, but only a representation of it. He wakes up in a midnight sadness, trying to say, I have tasted it, yet he has not tasted it. Now he is afraid ever to, lest his spring be discovered as soiled as the holy wells of Gloucestershire, and therefore the crees, and therefore his dreams. He prays to see her face in the new comet. Yet each night, this time in terror of not seeing it, he tries to will it there, yet is amazed that for some minutes now he cannot even remember her face. Yet at last arrives a clear night of seeing, so clear in fact that some time after midnight, supine in the starlight, rigid with fear, Mason experiences a curious optical readjustment. The stars no longer spread as upon a domed surface. He now beholds them in the third dimension as well. The eye creating its own z-axis, along which the star-choked depths near and far rush both inward and away, and soon, quite soon, billowing out of control. He collects that the heavenly dome has been put there as protection, in an agreement among observers to report only what it is safe to see. 15 years in the business, and here is his initiation. To editorialize momentarily, it is astonishing how we see the stars in 3 dimensions, but it only takes a change of attitude to see the dome that they saw. Now, nothing in the sky looks the same. As to the comet, I cannot account for how, but there came this night to this boggy, miasmatic place an exceptional clarity of the air, a sort of optical tension among the stars that seemed ever just about to break radiantly through. And there, in Leo, bright-maned, lo, it came. It came ahead, and 'twould be but prelude to the finger of Corsica, which now appeared, pointing down from heaven. And the place where it pointed was the place I knew I must journey to, for beneath the sky-born index lay, as once beneath a star, an infant that must again remake the world. And this time 'twas a sign from earth, not only from heaven, showing the way. Quite so, yet I'm not terribly sure this ought to be in your report, says Maskelyne. Objections from the clergy readily imagined. What? Leaving aside the question of actually, well, what does it mean? No idea. I was in a kind of daze. Have ye never fallen into one of those cometary dazes with the way the object grows brighter and brighter each night? These apparitions in the sky, we never observe them in motion, gone in seconds, and if they return we do not see them. Once safely part of the night sky, they may hang there at their pleasure, performing whatever in their work corresponds to shifting jibs and staysails, keeping perfectly upon station, mimicking any faint, unnamed star you please. Do they watch us? Are they visits from the past, from an age of faith, when miracles still literally happen? Are they agents of the absented guardian? And are these its last waves, last beckonings, over the tops of the night trees? An astronomer in such a state of inquiries apt to write nearly anything. How about yourself? Of course, there are things one wishes to leave in, often yearns to. Then again, there are things one leaves in. Wondrous! Let's strike the passage, by all means. Now, what about the part round July, where I compare the aurora borealis to jellied blood? Do you want that one out too? I was just coming to that. They've been frightfully picky of late about that word. No one knows why. What? Blood? Well, too bloody bad, isn't it? The octagonal room echoes with indignation imperfectly mocked. Bloody hell, now ye come to it. Maskelyne looks about nervously. Pray ye, Mason, there's ever someone listening. What of it? You are the A.R., are ye not? Tell 'em bugger off. He receives a long look from Maskelyne he can't recall ever having seen before. 'Tis not the same office as it was in Bradley's day, and your own. There will never more be disputes like this current one over his obs. 'Tis said it may run on for years. His obs. Mason, who performed many of these observations himself, and is consequently in the middle of the quarrel, snorts, but does not charge. Instead of the old arrangements, we've now a sort of contract, rather lengthy one indeed, in return for this, gesturing round, yet keeping his elbow bent, as if unable to extend his arm all the way. They own my work. They own the products of my thinking. Perhaps they own my thoughts as well, thoughts unuttered as well. I am their mechanical cuckoo, perched up here in this airy cage to remind them of the first day of spring, for they are grown strange, this cohort, to the very wheel of seasons. I am allowed that much usefulness, the rest being but drudging captivity. Difficult life. Excuse me, what's this thing where the astronomer's couch used to be? 'Tis styled by the knowing a pêche mortelle. One of Mr. Chippendale's. Elegant, don't you think? Clive bought it for me. Defiantly, the small eyes tightening for some assault, the lips remaining steady. Who? Clive? Of India? Is all Mason says. I meant for the observatory, of course, replies Maskelyne. What would you do with mortal sin, when you wouldn't know it if it came over and bought you a pint? I have learned to simulate it, however, by committing a greater than usual number of venial ones. Mason, trying not to stare too openly, has just realised that Maskelyne, direct from the astronomer's couch, is wearing his favourite observing suit, a garment of his own design that his brother-in-law, the famed Clive of India, sent him from Bengal, where the nabob had it cut and sewn with painstaking fidelity to a 31-page list of instructions from Maskelyne. It is a 3-piece affair, everything quilted, long jacket, waistcoat, and trousers which have feet at the ends of them, all in striped silk, a double stripe of some acidic rose upon the celadon for the trousers and waistcoat, and for the jacket, whose hem touches the floor when, as now, he is seated, a single stripe of teal blue upon the same colour, which is also that of the reivers. It is usually not wise to discuss matters of costume with people who dress like this, politics or religion being far safer topics. The suit, Mason knows, is but one of a collection of sportive outfits from the the Royal Astronomical Armoire, run up to Maskelyne's increasingly eccentric specifications by the subcontinental genius Mr. Deep and his talented crew, and shipped to him express by East Indiamen. The third fastest thing on the planet, as Munn liked to say, behind light and sound. Neville seems to miss the life, sleeping or drinking in the daytime, starting to come alive around dusk, quickening with the evening shift. He and Mason pace about, the window-lensed afternoon sun heightening the creases beneath their chins, amid motes of wig powder drifting in the glare of the beams. He exhibits a morally battered air and is not shy about discussing its origins. Once more the Harrison watch. Like an Hungarian vampire, despite the best efforts of good lunarians upon the board of longitude to impale it, has risen upon brazen wings in soft rhythmic percussion to obsess his position, his dwindling circle of time remaining upon earth, his very reason. It reached its peak in 67. The Bee of Al, in its wisdom, kept insisting on one trial after another. Finally, they hung it around my neck. New in the job, what was I supposed to do? Say no? To oversee trials of the watch at Greenwich, for God's sake, for nearly a damned year. Maskelyne had been observed glaring at the locked case, to which he held the key, apostrophizing the miserable watch within that could render moot all his years trooping in the service of lunars, with more of the substance of his life than he could healthily afford, staked upon what might prove the wrong side. Were honour naught but honour's honour kept, some thought they heard, all sins might wash away in tears unwept. Couldn't believe it, reported the room steward, Mr. Gonzago. Like watching Hamlet or something, isn't it? Went on like that for weeks. He wanted to break in. He didn't want to break in. He spent hours with scraps of paper, elaborate ways to damage the watch that would never be detected. He lived in this tension, visible to all, between his conscience and his career. Bringing it to Greenwich upon an unsprung cart over the London lanes might have done the job alone, Mason suggests to Maskelyne, none too gently. Retired navigators and ship's carpenters crept up the hill to witness this, feeling like macaronis who have paid their threepence at Bedlam. Yesterday, so vouches my mate, old Masky, he screamed and raved for quite an hour. Let's hope he's not too tired to give us some kind of show. I'd settle for a London minute. Look at my side of it, Maskelyne would blurt at them, too passionately, as he saw right away. That is, untying his cue and commencing to scratch his head furiously and at length. They've put me in an impossible position, haven't they? I mean, it isn't a state secret that I've an interest in lunars, nor that this blasted Harrison watch is the sole obstacle between your servant and the prize he has earned fairly, at the cost of his vision, his sleep, his engagement with society. Ordinarily, I'm the last one that ought to be given any authority over it, let alone the key permitting access. Yet if you ask why, you will hear, we are ensuring his honesty this way. He doesn't fiddle with it now. And if the watch comes through despite Maskelyne's curatorship, why then has it seen the fire and conquered it? How am I supposed to feel? The burden upon me is more than anyone should justly be made to bear. Like being the swab who holds the anchor pool. Aye, the purser of time. He looks a bit furtive to me. What say ye, boats? Like setting a spaniel to guard a prize cock. Gentlemen, Maskelyne, according to some, screamed. Why this unfriendly attendance? Is it the per diem, is that it? You wish what, 6pence more? A shilling? Shamed, disappointed in him, the veterans of Cartagena and Minorca begin to move, sighing and muttering away. I am of mathematical mind. 'Twould be an afternoon's work, recreation, rather, to devise a way to destroy the watch's chances for ever. And yet there is bound to be some inquiry, wherein each of my moments, since I was laden with this impossible duty, must be accounted for, yet already too many have passed in solitude, unwitnessed by others, such as your good selves, a blank sheet that invites fiction and her vulgar friends, slander and vilification to sport upon it. Dodgy. Then why not be hung for a sheep as a lamb? Maskelyne continued. I often find myself asking, not of God exactly, but of whatever might be able to answer the question. If the world already believe me party to a fiddle, why I'm not, you understand? When I'm not, you understand, then why not go in there with a hammer, so to speak, and really do a job? Classical, grumbles Euphemia. Easy to find fault with the Reverend Dr. Maskelyne. Her brother agrees. Though with our 11th commandment, I must not speak ill of another clergyman. His behaviour toward Mason was ever consistent with that of a brotherly rival for the love of and the succession from their father, Bradley. Did he, in posting Mason out of England, employ a code to Cavan in order to put him once again among Ulstermen as he had been upon the Pennsylvanian frontier, to Schehallien out of some mean desire to remind him of the error Cavendish pointed out, due to the Allegheny Mountains, or Cavendish being after all more enemy than friend, were these rather simple kindnesses and standing by an old colleague and ally. The long-winded letters to Mason in the field, though surely meant to assert his personal authority, may reveal nothing beyond the desire, out of resentments unvoiced, to bore their recipients into compliance. At Cambridge he had been now and then upon the receiving end of a jobation, or lengthy reproof, and perhaps this was his way of reasserting in his life a balance, having been born beneath the scales that would otherwise have been set allop by an excess of patience. It also appears that he did what he could to support Mason's claim to prize money from the Board of Longitude for his refinements to Mayer's lunar tables, whilst seeking none for himself. And he backed the younger Harrison's admission to the Royal Society, despite the ease with which his opposition might have been understood and excused. Nor was his approach to the Longitude ever the most congenial to have taken, the method of lunars being by no means universally loved, its tediousness indeed often resented, and not only by midshipmen trying to learn it. Many wished for a faster way, willing to cede to machinery a form of human effort they could have done without. Maskelyne fancied that, when he became Astronomer Royal, there might be an investiture, a passage, a mystery, an outfit. He began designing with the utmost restraint and taste, of course, ceremonial robes for himself, based upon the doctor's robes at Cambridge, rose upon scarlet, a black velvet hat, liripipes, tippets, sleeves to the ground, decorated all over with zodiacal glyphs, in a subdued gold passementerie. But to whom could he show it? The Royal Society might not approve. The King might be offended. When at all might he have occasion to wear it? Perhaps an occasion could be proclaimed. Star Day. Everyone up all night. No flame allowed. Food misidentified in the starlight. Lovers a tip and some glamorous stars like the Pleiades upon the rise. And the king would place in his hand something preserved from the days of the astrologers, a prism, an astrolabe, a gift of power. He would be sworn to secrecy. Of course, he would use it wisely. Mason has almost presumed to think of them as old troopers by now, with the transits of Venus behind them, Harrison's watch, battles budgetary and vocal, lost and won, wary veterans of campaigns in which has loomed as well the amiable beanpole Dixon, secretly afraid of what they were all caught up in doing, as if at the behest of the stars, which somehow had begun to take on for him attributes of conscious beings. "Seen it before," quoth Maskelyne, "rapture without a doubt. For some reason dissenters are particularly susceptible. Attacked by vertigo if he continued too long at the eyepiece, lost in terror before the third dimension. Indeed, running, when there was a choice, to earth rather than to fire. Desperate to pretend all was well, face kept as clear as the bottom of a stream in August. Nothing visible at the fringes of readability. Who knew him, truly? What might wait at the margins of the pool, mottled, still, river silt slowly gathering upon its dorsal side? At the end of the day, all Mason knows of Maskelyne is how to needle him. Maskelyne, I cannot go, yet as if uncertain as to how much Maskelyne intends to make him plead. That is, he cannot help adding, if it pleases your grace. The Astronomer Royal is not prepared. Again you renounce me. He does not exactly intend to blurt, his scowl appearing slowly, like a blush. Bloody infuriating, Mason. I know. Why not have another bowl of café au lait? And look ye, here, a lovely iced bun. Here, suppose you go to Scotland, only as a sort of scout. Look at likely possibilities. Report back to us. Us? Pay Mr. Dixon a visit upon your way, for heaven's sake. I've your permission for that, have I? Mason, half a guinea a day. Gentlemen usually accept a single honorarium, plus daily expenses. This might be quite your line, Mason. Try not to say line, Maskelyne. That is, mask, then, flirtatiously. Plain old mask. End of chapter.